all the other mental hangups, anxiety, depression, just feeling very daunted and overwhelmed and hopeless. These are feelings that are expressed to me all the time by my millennial peers and colleagues. Um, Buying a house is really tough right now, and with prices just skyrocketing all over the place. Um, a lot of people have started feeling very hopeless, and we're starting to see memes like this or down below here pop up, just expressing, that a person in their 30s today just feels like a very different world, a very different financial story compared to, what our parents' lives were like when they were in their 30s. Well, let's talk about it all today and, see if we can get over some of these mental and emotional hangups that are really getting in the way of you being able to actually buy a house someday. Everyone, this is Richard Whalen, owner and broker of the Imagination Brokerage. I am coming to you live right now from our beautiful brokerage office here in Santa Ana, California. Um, Today, we're going to be talking about something very near and dear to my heart. I have talked for a long time about how basically the emotional roller coaster of saving up to buy a house and then actually house hunting, making offers, dealing with rejection, how really it's the mental and emotional parts that I think are the hardest parts of home buying. You ask the average person what they think is the hardest thing about home buying, and they'll usually either say making enough money to do it or saving enough money to do it. And while those are important parts of the process, I'd say that, if you then kind of ask the follow up question, like, okay, well, how much money would you have to earn in order to afford to buy a house? How much money exactly would you have to save in order to buy a house? And the majority of people that you ask won't even really know the answers to those questions. In their head, it's just something that's just such a big number and it's so far away. It's just not for them. And those are the people that I really want to talk to today, because it is better to know and to quantify the answers to those questions and start working towards them than to just be so wrapped up in fear and anxiety and all sorts of other very deep, intense feelings that that you basically aren't able to make productive steps towards that. So let's talk about that emotional component a little bit more today. Um, I find that there are two broad categories of these kind of the mental hangups. It's either financial reasons, so the above mentioned, can't earn enough, can't save enough, or lifestyle reasons. There's something about your lifestyle, whether it's how close you currently are to where you work or where your kids go to school or close to your friends and family, and a lot of those things are very legitimate reasons to stay where you're at. I'm certainly not the a person to say that buying a house is the ideal circumstance for everyone in every geography in America, right? Like if you have to go to work every single day in Hollywood, and you got to be really close to there, but hey, the cheapest house is 1.2 million dollars. Yeah, maybe for the purpose of your work or for the purpose of your family, your kids, whatever, maybe it makes more sense to be able to stay where you're at. But for everyone else, it's something to really seriously think about, and think about what kind of compromises or sacrifices you might want to make. Because to put it very simply, from a purely financial perspective, owning just about anything is better than renting just about anything. Again, just purely from a financial perspective, right? Um, so let's get down more into, all right. So those financial reasons. I met a guy at a party a few months ago, a father of one of my daughter's friends, who, as soon as he found out what I do for a living, he had all sorts of great questions to ask about the whole kind of home buying and home investing industry. And, I gave him my business card. Yeah, I worked very hard on these really cool, shiny, eye-catching little business cards. And, he said, yeah, let me talk to my wife and we will sit down sometime in the next couple weeks and we will talk more about it. Love to learn more. We ran into each other again at another party several months later. This was just a couple weekends ago. And he told me that he took my business card and he feels so strongly about it that he stuck it up on his mirror. So as he's getting ready every morning, he looks at this business card and thinks, oh, you know what? I should give that guy a call sometime. And yet he doesn't. He procrastinates from it. Now, I am a legendary procrastinator. I definitely understand the emotions very well. And I think, as soon as he kind of described that feeling to me, I felt like I knew exactly where he was coming from. I feel a lot of, as an entrepreneur and as a millennial and as somebody who's, just out there trying to kind of grow my own portfolio and foundation, things like that. I actually feel a lot of financial stress and anxiety, a lot. And sometimes there are certain types of activities that are going to force you to sit down and really go over all the numbers, do all of your accounting. And, at least for me, I'm always kind of, I guess, scared or nervous about that process. Like I feel like once I really confront all the spreadsheets and all the numbers, that I'm going to just feel so much more stressed and upset that, I just kind of put off doing those things forever. I felt that way about my taxes this year, for instance. And I think a lot of people do. And for this new friend of mine, he is a teacher and an artist. A lot of his friends, this whole kind of social circle, they're all teachers and artists. And something that a lot of kind of creative people feel is sometimes they're just kind of really caught up with a sense of anxiety, regret, depression in regards to the career path that they've chosen. Something that is going to offer a lot less financial stability and, not as just overall, it's not an easy path financially to be an artist. And, he definitely, as we got to talking more, just that little roadblock in his mind was holding him back from doing just a very simple, productive step of just calling a knowledgeable realtor to learn more about the housing market. Begin the conversation of figuring out, okay, how much can I save within a certain budget? What does that look like, and would it actually work for my family to get a condo over here? Can I even afford a small house over here? I'll just say it again and again. It's better to know than to not know. It's better to have a plan. Maybe it takes a long time. Maybe it forces you to reassess, hey, is it more important for me to save up and do this? And if so, is it even worth making a substantial move geographically, making a substantial change in my career? I don't know. I don't know. Only you can answer that. But you're not going to be able to make that decision just by yourself. You need to talk to a financial advisor, an accountant, a realtor, trusted friends. Just, get that advice to start to think about it more rationally, more critically, instead of letting your emotions continue to get all knotted up and get yourself into analysis paralysis or I guess procrastination mode from even asking the questions in the first place. So that one little anecdote is really the reason why I put together this whole presentation for today. But let's talk about a few other ones that are also very, very common. The other big one is a lot of people feel like they haven't saved up enough money to buy a house. They make good salaries, but they just have no savings for some reason or another. And, we get this into our heads that, 20% down payment, 20% down payment, such that if you are just educated enough to kind of understand how loans work, but not enough to understand how to get creative with it, you might think that in order to buy a house in Southern California, you need to have $200,000 cash minimum in your bank account. And that's just not true. That's just completely untrue. Another reason to ask someone early to start, talking to lenders, even years before you might think you actually want to buy a house, or you'll realistically really be able to, because you want to have a very specific, attainable goal to actually know, hey, exactly how much do I need to earn? How much do I need to save? And I'd say at least 9 times out of 10, the answers to those questions are a lot lower and more attainable than people expect. And I think part of that is, so let's take a look at these. The reason why I have this meme up here, and we'll look at a kind of a couple of these, right? Like, I'll give you guys all a chance to read them. I'm not going to read this out loud to you. But, people keep seeing all these prices skyrocketing all around, comparing themselves to their parents' generation or even their older siblings' generation, and just feeling really hopeless, really helpless. Feeling like, hey, it's not even worth it to go out there and shop if all I'm going to be able to get is a little matchbox in the middle of nowhere. I see these memes all the time, and I actually try to, whenever I see a friend of mine posting something like this, I try to comment on it. First I try to meet them where they're at. I'm not always like, oh, anyone can buy a house, like that sort of thing, right? Like that's not, people don't react emotionally well to that, right? No, it's more like, hey, let me ask the question, like, what is it that you feel like is really holding you back? And really start a conversation about that. I had a couple friends that, he came to me when I asked him, I said, what was the one thing you learned after buying a house? So they had just bought a house. What was the one thing you learned after buying a house that you wish you had known before or years before? And he said, man, I had no idea how inexpensive PMI is, private mortgage insurance. If you look up online, just sort of randomly Google, like, can I do a low down payment loan, or what does that mean? For some reason, the top things that come up are a whole bunch of blog posts and articles from big finance companies telling you that PMI is the devil. It's just throwing money down the toilet. Don't do PMI, private mortgage insurance, because it's a waste. But, here my friend was telling me, listen, man, I pay $130 a month on $1 million house. And that saved us years and years and years of saving to get up to the number that I thought we would need to get to in order to start this process. Your mileage may vary. PMI amount is based not just on the amount of the loan, but on a whole bunch of other factors of like what percentage down payment you're making, what your personal credit is, and then, what the market's like right now. So it can be anywhere from like $100 to several $100s a month, but it's not thousands and thousands of dollars a month. And there are lots of other alternative options as well, like taking out a second mortgage and doing there's all sorts of different loan programs. Like one of the things that I will say both to people in this position and in the previous position of being an artist or being somebody that makes only commissions and things like that, it's very difficult for banks to understand that type of income. Gig workers, actors, I mean the list goes on and on. If you don't have like a standard W-2 salary, sometimes you might feel like your bank doesn't really like you very much and isn't going to give you the loans that you want. But in this environment where the interest rates are so high and everybody seems to be struggling to get a loan, believe it or not, the banks are actually really hurting right now for business. And because when interest rates are high, it's not like banks are just churning out profit. What happens is it means that it's kind of like a gas station. When gas prices are high, the gas station doesn't make that extra profit. It's the gas company making the profit. The gas station needs to buy the gas wholesale at a higher price, and so they're struggling to make ends meet too. And the same goes for the banks. So many banks are so desperate right now that I am seeing the most unbelievably generous loan programs I've ever seen. Down payment assistance, rate buy downs, just the requirements to be able to get a loan just keep going lower and lower and lower in terms of proof of income. And if you always struggle to be able to show your income before, kind of like pre-pandemic, you might be surprised that in today's world you just show a bunch of bank statements, and there's like a new kind of like bank statement loans are all the rage right now. And you might find that, hey, where a bunch of people said no in the past, they might say yes today. All right, let's talk. Let's move past the financial reasons and talk about the lifestyle reasons. I have a couple friends that for they both made very good money working in solid salary jobs. They could have bought a house a decade ago, but for whatever reason, they always sort of valued their lifestyle choices over the kind of the long-term financial planning choice. So what I mean by that is, they had their things they like to buy. They had their cars they like to drive. They have their, hobbies that were expensive hobbies. They had their traveling that was expensive traveling, and then on top of all of that, they wanted to live, right by the beach. And, they made good money, but not such good money that they could buy a house by the beach. Right. But after, I don't know, living out most of their mid 20s to mid 30s this way, it really, really started to hit them as they looked around and realized, oh my gosh, everything's getting so expensive now. If we don't get aboard this train now, I mean, we don't know when we're going to be able to buy something, like it's all fun and games until you realize that if you had bought something 10 years ago, you might have an extra $500,000 in your pocket right now in equity. And now you've got luxury. Now you've got options. So, I never want to make anybody feel bad for, past mistakes. I just say, hey, listen, don't make the same mistake again. Okay. Commit to one place that you want to live right now. We'll get you as close to the beach as you can get. We're going to get you something that's in as good of condition and as nice of neighborhood as is reasonable for the income level and for the price. And let's just kind of put you in a situation where, you're still going to be able to enjoy a certain amount of your lifestyle and also be building towards a more financially stable future, a future where, your equity built up in this house will allow you to retire or invest or, trade up to an absolute dream home. It's just simply much, much easier to take those later steps in life if you take these steps now to buy something in an area that's up and coming. Lastly, I want to kind of highlight a very specific type of lifestyle reason that is, to me, I think, one of the biggest missed opportunities out there. And it's people who travel a lot for work, or specifically, I have a friend that's in the military. He's a fairly high ranking officer in the Navy. And he has, at this point in his career, about every 2 to 4 years, moved to someplace else in the country for the past 20 plus years. And so, he's just gotten it into his head that, why would I buy anything? I move around too much. Why would I buy anything? Well, the greatest thing about buying a house is that it's not for forever. The greatest thing about buying a house is that it actually gives you more financial flexibility and more options compared to renting. What I mean by that is, let's say as soon as he got transferred to a new base, comparing, what it's like to rent. We understand what it's like to rent. You rent for a while, and then when it's time for you to move on, you just cancel the lease, and you're out however much money that rent cost for the, let's say, 3 years that you lived there. Okay. In this circumstance, it's like him, his wife, his child. They need to get a small house or a kind of a medium-sized apartment. And in Southern California, that's somewhere in the realm of like $3,000 a month. So $3,000 a month, times 12 times 3 years, that's close to $100,000. Okay. So in those 3 years, you have just lost $100,000. Bye-bye, gone. If instead he had bought something at the beginning and then sold it 3 years later, there's no guarantee, but there is a very, very good chance that the house could have gained enough in value that it ends up being a complete wash. You earn back enough that it certainly outpaces the amount of rent that you would have lost. But even if that doesn't happen, he could, like, let's say the market goes down, or interest rates went up, or something else that makes it so that it's not a good time to sell after 3 or 4 years. Well, then he can rent it out. He's a military officer who's always going around to different military bases all across the country. There's a never-ending supply of soldiers that are going to be living in and around this area for an entire generation at least. So, he could just as easily, every time he buys a new house and then needs to leave it, he just rents it out to other soldiers when he leaves. And by the time he finally retires from the military, he could have houses all over the country generating income. On top of all of that, as a veteran, you are able to buy houses with no money down. So it's not like he even has to save up hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to buy a new house every time he moves. He just buys a 0% down house every time he moves. And then before he tries to get a new VA loan, because you only get one VA loan at a time, he just refinances it with a conventional loan and then gets the VA loan on the next one. It's so simple. And I've also heard of the same business model working for people who are professional athletes, because professional athletes have to travel around all the time. I met a baseball player that has followed exactly this strategy. And by the time he retired from baseball at the age of 30, he owned 8 houses. And those 8 houses are going to be able to give him the financial support he needs for the rest of his life. So, all right, we talked about some of the financial reasons why people have, all these hangups, and how some of those reasons are very rational and very legitimate, but oftentimes we wrap up so much emotion around it that it starts to cross over the realm into being, actual hangups, anxiety, depression, thoughts and feelings that aren't really going to help you feel better and get better. There's a then there's lifestyle reasons as well. Lifestyle reasons that many of them can be very legitimate. Many of them can, really, when you think about it, it's like, you know what? For my family, it doesn't make sense to drive an hour and a half commute every day, or it doesn't make sense for us to leave this school district. But for every one of those, there's also a lot of situations where people have these sort of, again, these mental and emotional ties to what they expect of their lifestyle and what they want, that maybe if you really stopped and thought about it, those actually aren't very high priorities for me, or those aren't forever things. Like, I'm willing to make compromises. I'm willing to make sacrifices in the moment in order to ensure a more stable, more free financial future for myself and for my family. All right. Well, I know that it's hard out there. I know that, as a millennial, sometimes it feels, at least in Southern California, it feels like nobody, none of your peers own a house. And I mean, all I can tell you is that statistically, 65% of Americans own homes, and not all of them are millionaires. I can tell you that 55% of millennials nationally own homes. But I do understand that here in California, the number is more like 20 to 30%. But can't you be one of them? Couldn't you really think about it? Crunch the numbers, talk to the experts, make a plan. And don't you think that it really would be possible if everyone else, not everyone else, but if half to 2/3 of other people can do it, maybe you can too. And to get the knowledge and the tips and the tricks and all that of how to save and how to invest, there's so many resources out there, right? I'm sure I don't need to tell you about the Financial Independence Retire Early community that talks really all about saving money and building up wealth. For me, my flavor is much more taking big risks in entrepreneurship and investing, and hoping that those big swings end up leading to greater, greener pastures. So if you are interested in learning more about how to invest and all the strategies about how to pick a winning house that's going to help you build equity as fast as possible, please hit that like and subscribe button. And anytime you're thinking about buying or selling a home in Southern California, please do give us a call, shoot us a private message on whatever platform you're watching this on. Also a reminder, we are doing this live show every week, every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. And you are, more than invited to come in, join us live, ask us questions. I'm looking at the chat right now, and it seems like it's a fairly quiet chat today. But please feel free to, drop a comment down below, send me a message. I promise I read every single comment, every single message, and I'd be happy to answer your comment live on air next Thursday. Anyway, again, my name is Richard Whalen, owner and broker of the Imagination Brokerage. I am thrilled to be talking to you today about a topic that's really near and dear to me. And over the coming month, we're going to be talking about a few of the other mental and emotional hiccups, all the various, how I coach my clients through the roller coaster emotions of home buying. And, hopefully by the end of it, all of you will feel better prepared for the tasks ahead. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Find us at imaginationbroker.com. Catch you next week.